Hi, welcome to today's webinar presented by Lithius Group. I'm your host, Ben Bomar, president of Lithius Group, and I'm excited that you're here today to hopefully bust this myth that the way we've always done it is always a bad answer. And I certainly cop to the fact that there have been times where that phrase, the hair stands up on the back of my head, my neck, and the red flags come out, and I want to make change for change's sake. But that is not always the smart move. And I want to talk through that today. So we'll spend the next half hour sort of challenging that, looking into the ROI of why your way matters, and what you can do about preserving it and making sure that you understand it prior to making change. So before we get started on that, I want to ask this group, have you ever trained on any of these disciplines? Six Sigma, Strength Finders, EOS, super popular here in Minnesota. And if you have, then because these are all reputable tools, you are interested in increasing the knowledge and the skills and the behind the scenes understanding of the people in your organization. And you should be applauded for that. However, let's recognize that those are often outside strategies and concepts that have been proven across industry, which makes them valuable, but doesn't make them yours. And so my question for you would be, who says this? And if this phrase, my pleasure, means anything to you, then that probably means that you've eaten at a Chick-fil-A. And there's no way that everyone who works at a Chick-fil-A grew up saying my pleasure. There's no book of my pleasure that people bring in speakers and consultants to train in. Chick-fil-A has identified my pleasure as a part of their brand experience. And it is so, it's foundational to what their brand is and the experience of going and eating at that restaurant. Now, why is that important? And what is that? How do we go from Lean Six Sigma to my pleasure? And let's go back to one of the greats, Stephen Covey. We judge ourselves by our intentions, and we judge others by their behavior. And the reminder here is that actions are so much more visible and are so much more important to others' experience than what we intend through our words, our approach, our frameworks, and the understanding that we have from whatever training we've offered our team. So we're offering great training like Lean and Six Sigma and Strength Finders and EOS, but folks are judging us on whether or not our actions are something that they experience. So who are your others that matter, right? So they might be, again, these folks here, customers, colleagues, suppliers, partners, they like things the way you've always done it. They're not necessarily interested in change for change's sake. And so if you're triggered by that concept of we've always done it this way, I feel like I need to make a change, remember that you have some pretty powerful others that are judging your organization on its actions, and not what you necessarily intend by making changes to the organization or the processes. So those are those people. Who am I? Well, I'm Ben Bomar, founder and president of Lithius Group. And since 2021, I have been in this space of celebrating the institutional knowledge and processes of key people within organizations so that we can de-risk business transitions, we can improve productivity, and ultimately celebrate, retain, and share that institutional knowledge. Because at Lithius Group, we improve these areas of an organization, succession, development, by focusing on that institutional knowledge and those best practices. And so in that way, the way that your people have been acting, the actions that they have been taking, the experiences that they have been delivering consistently are something that you definitely want to pass on. And so we'll often see in our Lithius content a lot about this baton idea. How do we pass on something from one generation to the next? And a lot of times that means first understanding it and preserving it. Now, passing things on is very different today. So here are two, one legacy Disney star, one newer Disney star. And I have these up here because things used to be different. It used to be that there was an apprentice style of work where someone, so here we have Mickey he's the sorcerer's apprentice. We have the apprentice style where someone spent years learning at the feet of the expert. We don't have that anymore. Or we have over here with the Mandalorian, if you're familiar with that show, or at least the memes, this is the way. There is a way, there is an oath, there is a loyalty, there is a lifelong experience of delivering and learning and practicing the way. Neither of those two things happen in business anymore. And yet our organizations in many cases still seem to rely on the fact that we're going to have folks around for a long time, learning by osmosis. But that doesn't happen. And here's some of the trends that we see. I'll clean the chart up in a moment. But what we have seen is that that tenure in the United States by the average employee has declined 13% over about the last decade. And when we then look deeper at it, what we see is that workers later in their career have just about 10 years of experience with their current employer. So about 10 years of institutional knowledge on average. And yet some of the newest members of the team, folks who are earlier in their career, those folks have been with the organization on average, and their tenure on average is less than 3 years. So we have tremendous institutional knowledge, and we have relatively few years in which we can pass it on. And hopefully passing that on would tend to add value, right? It means that people would stay with us longer. Because right now, there is less institutional knowledge within the organization. Folks have a shorter time frame to pass it along. And that often means that future leaders within your organization are going to have to come from outside. And they're going to lack the critical context of how things are done within your organization. They might bring with them all the pedigrees and black belts and green belts and whatever else, but they might not have all of your knowledge. Highly likely. And those others, they care about that. They care about that way because it delivers for them that consistent experience. It means that your newest employees have a go-to person or a place to go for information. And your suppliers and your partners have consistent expectations and reasonable and reliable execution. So there are folks who are relying on your way of doing things. And you frankly rely on it. And you should really care about how things are being done for a couple of different reasons. And these are the three statistics that I find amazing. One, Qualtrics, who does research into consumer behavior and customer experience. 50% of consumers report that they would switch brands after a single poor customer experience. Gone are the days of brand loyalty in the way that we used to know them. This next one from McKinsey. In organizations that have well curated information, employees spend almost 2 hours per day looking for the information that they need to be successful. And lastly, if you want to put a financial risk on it, when someone transitions into a new role, you can financially weigh the risk of them not working out to be about 30% of that role's first year compensation. So there are very real ROI drivers for you and understanding how your way of working is within your group. And what we see in our research and our working with clients is that on average, a good rule of thumb is that for every $5 million in revenue impact, there's around $600,000 in risk. And if you'd like to work that out for yourself, risk and opportunities, I should put both the pros and the cons there, right? So we've got the transition risk, revenue, and team inefficiency, wondering how do we do it? That person who used to do it is no longer here. But there's also tremendous value in SME productivity. So your best people might have the ability to take on new things if they delegated. Their managers might be able to delegate to some of their most trusted team members, and teams that learn the lessons from the experts and the legacy holders within your organization, they can be more productive. So scan the QR code. That this link will come back in a moment if you want to try this out for yourself and check out some roles within your team. But who knows your way, right? So we know the risks. We know that it's there. We know that it's mattered. We know who's paying attention. Who knows it? Well, we use, or many organizations use, this classic McKinsey 9 box of performance and promotability. And in an organization that is truly average, bell curves all around, this is how performance is likely going to shake out, or how the distribution of your employees is going to shake out across performance and promotability. And you'll see I have this a couple numbers in green and a couple numbers in red. That's because often we focus on those people that are up and to the right, or that are sort of in the danger zone there with the total of 10% folks that are below, not performing well and probably don't have much runway within the organization. And that is a huge miss, because there is tremendous value. And if we only focused on that 40%, we're leaving another 60% on the table. Because what we know, and you'll hear a lot about this, and I'd encourage you to visit our, see some past webinars on knowing, doing, and being. But what we know is that these folks who are performing the job well and perhaps better than standard, so that 35% down there, handful of people are in that one little zero there. Those folks know how your business runs. They know the history of the organization. They know the mythology and the legacy and the stories and the context in which you operate. And so you have a chance to talk about that. Then we have those folks who are in this 30%. They're your doers, right? They're promotable, they're succeeding, they're doing well. It's tremendous. And then lastly, everyone in this section is probably some sort of standard bearer for the quality and the being and the approaches that work within your organization. So we're going to dig into knowing, doing, and being, and kind of come back to those various sections of the 9 box for the rest of the talk. Knowing. All right, so I'm going to borrow from Farmers Insurance. You're probably doing the music in your head right now. What's the phrase here? The phrase is, we know a thing or two because we've seen a thing or two. And that is absolutely what is happening there in that knowing section, the bottom 35, bottom being in that 9 box, that 35%. And we have had experience in helping folks. And it's interesting. I bet you didn't think about the fact that your CEO or COO or executive director is actually in that area. How many promotional opportunities are there for CEOs? How promotable can they be within their organization? Probably not a lot. Hopefully they're performing at or above standard. But we've worked with CEOs and COOs that have founded industries and their organizations. And what's been really amazing is that because of how much they know, they're often brought in to solve problems, to maintain relationships, or they're available to the point where key customer relationships, those folks are reaching out to them first. And that creates risks because it's not giving the next layer within the organization a chance to save the day or become the go-to person for clients. And so what we'd recommend in a situation like that, and what we did, was create some scenario reflections where how problems got solved was really uncovered, or where there were plans for relationship transition maps, where key relationships and over time transitioning key relationships was something that was done intentionally, so that the rest of the organization was able to step up and relieve some of the single person risk that was found within the CEO and the COO. All right, so that's your knowing. Here's your doing. How can it be that if you have standard operating procedures within your organization, that above average performance could exist, right? It shouldn't make sense, right? If everyone's following the SOPs, then there ought not be a way in which someone could be better than the SOP. And yet we know in reality that is the case. And this is what we did. We worked with this person, we'll call her Susan. And she was essential to the production and making sure that the line was able to do what it needed to do. And when she was out unexpectedly for a 3-day medical, all of a sudden every KPI in the joint was off. And when folks came back, they said, "What happened?" Well, Susan wasn't here. And what we found was that Susan was following the SOPs, but she was adding additional value and she was creating new ways of working that the team had come to rely on. And so by having her demonstrate how she approached that, we were able to reduce risk. And the learning and development team was able to take the lessons of information gathered about how Susan did job and is now able to update and create better SOPs for the rest of the organization that incorporate the added value steps that had become part of how Susan operated. The team was used to her way, and now they're able to incorporate her way and make it something standard. So that repeatable process is really important and really valuable. All right, so we've done knowing, we've done doing, now let's do being. Okay, if you know comedy, you probably know these three people. And you also know that when one of these actors is cast, that is an instant tell about how the humor is going to unfold. Mantzoukas, Melissa McCarthy, Ken Jeong, they are going to bring a certain type of humor to the show in which they have been cast. And that is in a lot of ways similar to what some of the best people on your team bring to every project, bring to a team, a retreat, bring to their, the folks that they lead and the folks that they follow. And I hope that there's a person in mind right now for you that you recognize. Yes, they always bring a generous spirit. They always bring a creative problem solving approach. And so an example of this in an organization that we worked with is Dawn. And Dawn was a founder of a high-end construction business, and her plan was to leave via sale, right? She was going to exit, go off to retirement and sell the organization and move on, take her wins and move forward. But what she understood and what others had told us about her was that she just had this mystical ability to foresee and solve problems. And she had just maintained incredible relationships with the subcontractors over time, just was very pro subcontractor. And that had earned a tremendous amount of loyalty. And these were not things that were necessarily showing up. They would pop up in a meeting. They would pop up in the tone of a request for assistance. And so what we did was actually, even though Dawn knew that she was doing these things, we actually talked to other folks about what it was like working with her, and then had those reflections on some of those events when problems had been foreseen and addressed, and had never really grown outside of the idea stage. And ultimately, that enabled us to define the unique value proposition that Dawn offered, and by extension, her company offered, so that it could be maintained throughout the eventual sale and exit. So knowing, doing, being, these are three ways to talk about your way and what matters within your organization. So to offer you an action plan of how you might apply this for yourself, focus on knowing. First off, let's identify folks who have universally appreciated wisdom, right? Go with someone where everyone thinks you have your head screwed on straight because you're interested in understanding what they know. And honestly, take a victory lap. Maybe that's you if you're part of a senior leader inside of a small organization. But write down 3 bits of knowledge that you wish more people had heard. Could we document the war stories? Could we look at the industry insights? Could we capture and preserve the company history? And then set up a plan to have that key person walk through those 3 pieces of knowledge, and then, find ways to share it, right? Document it, turn it into stories. So that's knowing. That would be one way to approach history, personas, war stories like that. Now, when it comes to doing, I would encourage you to find tasks that, one, fit the criteria. They are essential for operations, and you either have a real risk issue because very few people know how to do it, or you have a scaling opportunity because many people perform this task. Then identify who is the lights out, undisputed SME for each of those tasks, and have them build out your standard operating procedure for how they perform the job. Not how it should be performed, but how they perform the job. That's really where you're going to learn. Then review it, challenge your own assumptions, see if you need to incorporate something about their way into the company way. And lastly, I talk about this universal, undisputed champion. Find someone who is universally appreciated for what they bring to the party. And then write down 3 specific attributes of what you appreciate about them. And then go talk to other people. Make it celebratory. You would be amazed how positive it is when someone is asked to pay a compliment to someone that they truly respect. And so ask others to talk about those attributes and see if you can't uncover how their way of being, what that means to other folks within your organization. And I got to tell you, if you do this, one bonus is you have compliments primed for one, two, three, four, five, six, seven people inside your organization where you can go to them and you can say, you specifically add X, Y, and Z to this organization, and it matters a lot through your knowledge, through your skills, or through your approach. Also, I've talked about this knowing, doing, and being piece before in some of our past webinars. Encourage you to go find us on YouTube. You can watch those on demand. All of that to say, we know that this works because we have seen it as a part of helping organizations prepare for key person retirements, as a part of scaling training and reducing the burden on subject matter experts through our best practices and SOP documentation, or as I talked about earlier, helping an organization prepare for acquisition and a founder exit by working across the entire senior leadership team. And you should feel confident that these basic principles work in whatever industry you are in. So whether that's manufacturing or professional services or healthcare or service and impact, this matters and it makes a big difference. If you're getting inspired by the idea of, hey, how would I do this, but I don't think I have enough time or I'd like a different opinion, would love to have a conversation with you. We often talk with folks about our two main products, that being our key person program, which focuses on those people who know a lot about a lot, those hubs. There's a handful within every organization. And then our best practice programs that really focus on SOPs and building out the ways and sort of the repeatable, scalable processes that happen within your organization. And we've just launched a new product called the Rapid KPP. As much as I'm going to continue to preach being planful, we do have the ability, if someone turns in their notice today, we have the ability to launch a Rapid KPP and cover the essential know-how within that 2 weeks notice period. So more on that. Let's talk about resources. I mentioned the key person risk calculator. There was a QR code earlier. This is the URL. You can go and calculate the key person risk for anyone on your organization, and you can get a detailed report emailed to you after you do that. We also have key person risk worksheets where we help folks identify what are their goals, who's instrumental in helping us achieve those goals, and how significant is my risk and how should I prioritize taking action to preserve their ways of working for the organization. And as I mentioned earlier, our past webinars, and we do these probably once a month or so, we have these available on our YouTube site. So if you're interested, I would love to tell you more about what we do. I'd encourage you to book a call. I'll teach you all about the STONE technique, which is our approach to preserving this information. You see everything here. You can visit us on the website, send us an email. But I also want to say we are running a promotion as a part of our Q4 launch of the Rapid KPP. If you're interested and you just take a meeting with us to learn about Rapid KPP, then next year, if and when you ever need one, you'll receive a $500 discount off of that. And that offer is good through the end of 2025. So take a meeting with us now. Earn yourself a discount if you ever need it next year. All right. With that, I want to say thank you so much. We're coming in right at about 23 minutes. I'll put my contact information up here. Reach out if a further conversation will be valuable. But I hope that you've learned a little bit today about why your way matters, that there are people that are looking for your team to continue to be consistent in the ways that they've delivered value in the past, that there is a financial benefit to you for keeping things consistent and at a high standard for your client base, and that there's additional value for your organization for you to preserve it just for your own sake, because of the fact that people aren't around for as long within our organizations. And so making training available and preserving those ways of working and sharing it with the next generation of employee is so important, and a framework and an approach on how to do that. So with that, I want to say thank you for being here. I'm going to pause and then we'll check the chat and just see if there's any questions for today But otherwise, thank you so much for being here. I hope that this has been helpful. If it has, hey, repost, let folks know that you found value in this podcast or in this webinar. And I hope we have the opportunity to discuss further. Take care.